Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stacklehouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse, and this is episode 93. In today's episode, I'm interviewing Certified Fibromyalgia Coach Julie Hamilton about her new book, Chronic Illness at Work. Now, Julie and I cover a lot of things in this interview, so make sure you stay through to the end. We will have a way you can get a copy of Julie's book for free. Whether you are an employer or an employee, there is a lot of information in her book that will be fabulous for you. We talk about all things work-related. We also talk about how she has found ways to feel better herself and about the process of writing a book with a chronic illness, as she and I have both done that now. We talk about that a little bit as well. Now, let me introduce you to Julie Hamilton. As a former human resources director, Julie knew the resources to use, such as the Family Medical Leave Act and workplace accommodations, to help her with the tasks she was struggling with at work. She didn't need to worry about her job when she needed to take time off for flare days or medical appointments, and she went from missing 2 to 4 days a month to missing 2 days or less a year. Then, after relocating to Ohio, her chronic illness made it impossible for her to work. That is when she studied to become a certified fibromyalgia coach. That's when she joined my very first class, and she learned to manage her fibromyalgia. Julie has gone from being in bed 90% of her life to walking 3 miles a day and even participating in her first 10K. She now helps professionals who have fibromyalgia maintain their career and regain their active social lives. Julie's goal is to help companies create an inclusive environment for the chronically ill and assisting them in implementing policies to benefit both the employee and the company. She understands what it takes to make it work and can educate the company and the employee on how this collaboration can work. Now, I do have to just give a little disclaimer here. Of course, Julie and I are talking in general terms. We're giving examples, but they may not be right for your specific situation. So make sure you talk with someone like Julie or another qualified professional if you need advice about your own work situation. Here's my interview with Julie. Hey, Julie, welcome. Congratulations, Miss Best-Selling Author over there.
Yay, thank you. It's so exciting.
I know. I don't know about you, but when my first book came out, it was kind of a very surreal experience, almost like it was a game I was playing, which just didn't feel real at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, when is it really going to hit? I don't know.
When you have a physical copy in your hands, that's a big one.
They're on their way. I can't wait.
So exciting. Well, congratulations. And I'm so excited to share you and your book with everybody on the podcast today. I would love to start a little bit with your story. Like, how did you get to this place? So your book is called Chronic Illness at Work. And I'm sure that wasn't a book that was just written about other people.
Oh, no. I was diagnosed, 12, 13 years ago with fibromyalgia. And my previous life, I always call it, was human resource director / manager for 20, 25 plus years. And so during the time of my diagnosis, I was an HR manager. So I was working 24 hours, 7 days a week. Not that I worked that, but I was on call outside of my working hours, I should say. So there hasn't ever been an hour of the day I've not worked, even 3 o'clock in the morning, Saturday nights, whatever. So when this came about, this diagnosis, I had no idea what it was and I'd never heard of it. And so I did a lot of research and had a great doctor. And between my doctor and my rheumatologist, we got it under control. Then fast forward a few years, and I relocated to Cincinnati, Ohio, and I went into a flare that lasted about 4 years. And I couldn't work. And I just thought, I got to learn more. So that's when I took your class and became one of your first fibromyalgia coaches. I got my certification with you, researched a lot, found whatever I could find on fibro besides what you were teaching us. Started my business and kind of worked from there. And then, a couple of years ago, I was like talking to my brother and I said, I don't really know what I want to do. What am I going to do? I can't work in HR. I'd fire myself. I can't make it to work on time. I can't do these things that I used to do. And he said, why don't you write a book? So he planted that seed many years ago. And so that's been nagging at me, that little back of the head thing where it's
Yes.
like, you need to write a book. And I'm like, no, I don't feel well enough. So my husband and I relocated to the Phoenix area. I learned how to take back my life using
Yes,
the
thank
name
you.
of your book and learned how to manage it again and really have it back under control again, manageable. And I decided, you know what? Now's the time. I can share my knowledge of the HR. I can share my knowledge of chronic illness, but let's put them together so it's advantageous for both employees and employers.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. The story that you tell at the very beginning of your book, almost word for word, could have been what happened to me before my fibro diagnosis. So, you listening, get a copy of Julie's book. She uses an example at the beginning of a normally stellar employee who just can't make it to work on time. And in my case, I remember that day that my boss called me into the office and she was totally like, I'm about to let you go, but let's talk first. And just was able to actually get some, change my hours a little bit and just a few accommodations to make work for me. And I ended up being the manager and taking over the whole support department of that company. And it was a good thing for the company and a good thing for me. And I think that's one of the most important things about your book is that, yeah, it helps those of us with chronic illnesses, but helps the company too. Like it's in their best interest to actually help us.
Exactly. And you can take that once stellar employee and make him that stellar employee again just by working with them, find out what's going on. Like you said, maybe making a few job accommodations, adjusting hours. And I talk about that in my book about things. I knew I was a great HR manager and I knew I could do the job, but I just needed tricks and tools in my toolbox to let me be able to do that job again. And so, really, I navigated that on my own because I knew both sides. But, a lot of people don't have that advantage. And that's kind of where this book comes in. It's not only the employee, but it's up to the manager or the supervisor, HR, whoever it is in your company to come up and say, hey, what can I do to help you? I know you're a good employee and I see you're struggling. What can we do for you to make your job easier, make it work for you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important. So important. And my case was actually just the opposite of yours because I didn't know and just happened to, have somebody who did the right thing. But most of us don't know what our rights are, don't know what is, we're just thankful to have a job a lot of times, right? Thankful to
Yeah.
have the insurance to be able to pay for what we need.
And we're too scared to tell anybody at work because we do need our job. We do need our insurance. but also shame on the company for threatening that and holding that over you. They should want to work with you. They would want to retain you because in today's job market, I mean, how many places do you go where it says help wanted,
Oh my gosh, everywhere.
open positions, workers needed? It's everywhere. And so why not work with the current employees to help retain them and do what you can to help them?
And this is going to become even more and more important because it's something like 20 to 50% of the people who end up with COVID end up with long COVID, right? So we're going to see more and more people who are having to live and work with some kind of a chronic illness.
Yes. And I had clients that are like that. They're like, I have long COVID, and long COVID mixed with my fibro. I just don't know what to do. So, that's kind of where it comes together. And it's just, figuring out what works for them. But, there's labor laws. There's a lot of things companies can do to help that employee.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we get into all the HR stuff that I know you love to geek out on.
Yes, HR geek at its finest.
I would love to actually ask you a little bit just about the book writing process, because I think a lot of people have that idea in the back of their head, maybe want to write a book someday. And especially with fibromyalgia, with brain fog, with chronic pain, with fatigue, it becomes a whole different ball game. So, let's just talk for a second here, fibro author to fibro author.
Yeah.
What surprised you about writing your book, about that journey?
When I decided to work with the publisher editor, I think it was back in April, maybe in September 29th. And I thought, oh my Lord, that is not far enough away. I'm going to panic
Right,
here.
like 5 months or something like that.
Yeah. And and then they give me the to-do list. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to get this done. But, the actual writing process only took me maybe 15 hours, 18 at the most, because I have all of that jargon, all that knowledge up here just floating around. It's hovering. And I would also tell you that I'm a very faith-based person. And before I started writing, I had a ritual with lighting a candle. I know people will think I'm crazy, but I lit a candle and I said my prayers, open, all this, and the words just flowed out of me. I could write a chapter in under an hour. And I was like, wow, where did that come from? But I think it's just because of all of my years of experience, all of that kind of stuff, and actually using employer side together already gave me that experience and knowledge just to put it on paper.
And I do want to give the caveat right here that writing a nonfiction book is a much different animal than creating characters and stories and writing, a novel. Julie and I, of course, both wrote nonfiction. And Julie, you're so right. Like everything is already there. We just sort of have to get out of the way so it can come through and out and onto the paper.
And I think the hardest thing was organizing it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
how this book going to flow, what's going to be in each chapter? Because I was just word vomiting. Right. All of this stuff comes out of you, and I want to include this, I want to include this, I want to include this, and and it just comes out, and then you're like, well, is it really important that they know that, or is it just because it's all about in my head? So it's a lot of organization, really, and all of that. But I thought the process in actual writing was easy. It's the stuff that goes on the front end and back end that were probably harder for me, and I got in my own way.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was about like, what do I not share? Right. Like the hardest part was what I had to leave out. Right. Because you can't write the book about everything. It's not an encyclopedia. It's just about this one book. And how do you filter that out?
Yeah. So I did have to leave out about the time I stole a car. So I had to leave that story out of there. But yeah. I did include the tattoo story. So
You did, which is as my absolute favorite story. Although I don't think I've heard the car theft story. You'll have to share that at our next retreat because
yeah.
I need that one. But yeah, I think a lot of people will relate to your tattoo story. There's so many things that we do with brain fog. And y'all, I'm not giving away the story here on the podcast. You will have to get Julie's book. But it's such a perfect example of the way our brains just don't work right when we are in such fog. And so, speaking of fog, how did you do with writing the book and organizing things? How was your managing your fibro symptoms, brain fog, pain, fatigue?
Really, I am. Since I've moved to the desert, I haven't had as much brain fog unless we have a storm pattern. Now, here, like a week or two, we had one, and I was, down and out a couple of days. I was saying really ridiculous things, but I don't have that as much now that I have my fibro managed. But the fatigue is more what's it. So I blocked out certain times and then I could rest, and I didn't like write all day. It was more like maybe 2 or 3 chapters blocked out that time and I could rest in between that. But yeah, I had a little time crunch at the end because my husband was traveling in Europe and he calls me on Wednesday and says, I booked a ticket for you to come and meet me in Europe because I miss you on Friday. You're coming Friday. And I said, I have 6 chapters to write. I got laundry. I got to pack and I got to close my house up, dude, and find somebody to watch it. He goes, well, I have faith in you. You can do it. Okay, God, here we go. Let's buckle up. I was on a plane Friday morning going to Europe.
That's so funny. That is so
Yeah.
funny. I saw you traveling on Facebook and I was like, she's got a book to write. What is she doing?
Oh, yeah. So, like, I'm in Europe and it's a different time zone. And so I was up in the middle of the night meeting with my editors, meeting with all that stuff, meeting with clients in the middle of the night because that's my job. I have things to do. I can't just play all the time. So I got it done and I just was smooth sailing. I guess
That's
when
cool.
you're determined and you want to get the message out and you want to share it with people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think not that I've had kids, but I imagine it's a little bit like birthing a baby. Like it comes when it wants to come. And if it's not ready, it's just not ready.
Yeah. But, talking about birth of a child, when it came to publishing it, that's when I got so emotional because it's like handing off your baby and now everybody gets to see it. You're exposed to everyone. Does she
Yeah.
really know what she's talking about? And I'll tell you, hell yeah, I do.
That's right. That's right. And I can second that too. I told you I would write the foreword for your book, but I did that before I read it. So there was a little bit of, I know you enough to know, like, what the hell you're talking about. You're right. But at the same time, it's like, you told me forever, you're not a writer. I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. No, I guess you can't say that anymore. You wrote a book and it's a good one too.
Thank you.
The thing that I love most about it is that it is easy to understand. It's concise. It's like there's no frills. It's got what it needs. It's not like you're sitting down to read a Harry Potter thickness HR manual, right? Like this is just what you need to know, which I think is awesome for people to be able to like pass that off to their HR person and not feel like it's going to be too burdensome for them to open the book and read it.
And even nowadays, so many companies are outsourcing their HR. So the people actually handling stuff might just be an office manager or something. So this gives them layman terms of the labor laws that they should follow. But a couple chapters in there also pertain to trying to get to understand the employee. What are they experiencing? What are they feeling? Why am I seeing this? If I see this, does this mean this or does it mean this or what is it? So I really go into explanation in a couple chapters so the employer can try to understand what the employee is experiencing.
And I think it's also really nice for us, the people who have the chronic illness, to walk into a situation and have them already know a little something, right? To be able to not have to explain everything. Because I think that's one of the things that's so hard for us sometimes is that we're having to like explain things that really are nobody's business. But in order for them to understand why we need the help that we need, it's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah. And I do stress also in the book and just anytime I'm talking to a client, confidentiality. It's not okay if you're the manager to talk about your staff's employee or health issues at the I always say water cooler, but those are the thing of the past. But you know what I mean? The copy machine or the break room. It's not okay to do that.
Zoom chat these days.
Yeah, it's confidentiality.
Uh-huh.
So they just need to be aware of that. And a lot of places aren't aware of it or don't respect that.
Yeah. And your book is written for the HR person, the manager, the boss. But I do think it's really good for those of us who are working with a chronic illness to also read so that we know what our rights are.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And I think, like, if you read my story, there's probably bits and pieces you can really relate to. And it just makes you feel good, I think, know there is hope and there is things that can be done. And it doesn't have to be a struggle all the time. And here are things at work I can do to make my life easier.
Right. So, for the person who's listening, who is that boss, that manager, that HR person, if they're listening to the fibromyalgia podcast, there's probably a reason. And so they probably have some kind of chronic something. So they probably understand this a little. But what would you say to them about the information in your book and why it would be helpful for them?
I just think it gives everyone a greater understanding what chronic illness fibromyalgia is, but it also helps the employee know that they're not alone and that there's things that can be done. But the employer to know, well, yeah, I guess I could work this person and not just fire them. Yeah, I need to talk to some of my managers. Okay, well, we need to do training. How do we do that? So it's just kind of a little bit of both. But one thing that I would recommend for both employer and employee side is to look in there because I do talk about how important ergonomics is. And, we as office, HR managers, whatever, under OSHA, it's our duty to provide a safe working environment. So ergonomics falls under safety. But then for us as employees with chronic pain, that can help with the stress and the computer work and the fatigue because our shoulders go up and forward. And so I talk in there about this is how it should be, and this is what you should do. This is what your desk should look like. This is the heights. This is the distance. This is your chair. So it doesn't always just pertain to chronic illness. It can pertain to just a regular person who has no chronic
Hey,
illness.
who doesn't want to have one?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So we don't develop all those chronic issues, carpal tunnel and everything else, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I know you shared some of this on one of our recent Alumni Association calls, and several of the other coaches and students on there just found that super valuable. I think even one of them said her mom was complaining about some back pain, and so she was able to help her with what you taught with ergonomics. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And people don't realize just the posture, the way they're sitting, maybe it's just their office chair, how much of a difference that can make for you.
Mhm.
So, but yeah.
Definitely, definitely. So, for the person who is listening, who is working with a chronic illness, maybe has, no management responsibilities or anything like that, just an employee, obviously, this book will help them with their rights. But can you give maybe some tips or hints or like what are some of the things that might be available to someone that they hadn't even thought were a possibility?
I would take a look at your job tasks and just see if there's any job accommodations that can be made. And if you don't know what that is, you could always reach out to me. You can talk to your primary care physician, your rheumatologist, whoever your medical team is, or you could talk to your boss. But yeah, I think job accommodations is huge and it's going to be bigger, I think, as we go forward, because like you mentioned earlier, more and more people are going to have long COVID. But I think also from the pandemic, we're going to see more and more people diagnosed with fibromyalgia because of the stress, the job related stress, the financial stress, the home stress, the homeschooling, just trying to manage everything, and it's fibromyalgia is normally diagnosed in women. There are some men that have it, but mainly women. And as you can see, we're the ones that were probably working from home, homeschooling, just all of that. We try to manage it all and we don't take care of ourselves. So that's what I would do, is really look at the job accommodations.
And we do have 3 other episodes with Julie on the podcast here. I will link to those in today's show notes. So if you want to go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/93, we will have links to the other episodes. Julie did an episode that is all on work accommodations. They'll give you a lot more ideas for what some of those things can be, how to ask for them, what it takes to get those accommodations approved. She also did an episode on using the Family Medical Leave Act for fibromyalgia, and then a third episode on like returning to work in the days of COVID and what does that mean, which might be less relevant now, but if you're somebody who has a compromised immune system, has been able to stay at home, and now your company's making you come back to work, that would be a great episode to listen to. So, since I just mentioned the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, for people who don't know what that is, can you just share a little bit what it is?
Yes, of course, with any law, there's criteria that the employee and the employer need to meet. But FMLA will cover or protect, I should say, protect an employee's job when they need to be off work. And in this case, for a serious illness. There are requirements to meet serious illness. I think it's meet 2 doctors' appointments within a year. And there's like 1 or 2 other things that I can't think of off the top of my head, but it's mentioned in my book. But to apply for that, it helps cover and protect the employee's job when they need to be off, like for doctor's appointments for their fibromyalgia, or even when they're in a flare. But the most important thing is when your doctor's completing that, make sure that they put it's intermittent, meaning it doesn't have to be consecutive days. So if you're sick 3 days in March and you don't have another flare till June, it covers those 3 days in March and then whatever days in June. So intermittent, that's what that means there. And if you have questions, you can reach out to myself, or there is also a website that you can go to. But as most HR labor law stuff, it's a lot of legal verbiage. So, but yeah, it would help protect your jobs and covers when you're off work. Those are the main things. Another thing I forgot to ask or mention on the job accommodations, there's also a Job Accommodations Network that if you ever have questions on that, you can go on the internet, and I think it's called askjan.com.
Oh, yes, I've seen that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Either one of those things would help.
Yeah, we will definitely have those links on today's show notes too. It's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/93. This is episode 93. The other thing that I think a lot of people don't always think of is that ADA, what is it, American Disabilities Act or something close to that?
Americans with Disabilities Act.
I knew there was another word in there, Americans with Disabilities Act. That actually applies to all of us. Fibro, not fibro, that has to do with your ability to do and not do things. So that's, I'm assuming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you have migraines and the fluorescent lights in your office trigger those migraines? Those are all things, your fibromyalgia, all of that can fall under the ADA, which means you have rights there too.
Yes. And it can also include if your employer perceives that you have a disability.
So if somebody has questions about all of these things, right? We've got all these different laws, we've got all the different, rights and responsibilities of both employer and employee. Obviously, it would be helpful to have a little bit of assistance here, right? Whether it's somebody explaining things to you or being able to say, hey, here's my situation, what can I do? How do you work with people and how can you help with this?
Okay. Am I working with an employee or an employer?
Ooh, yes. Let's do both. So let's start with the employer. How can you help employers?
I can make recommendations or suggestions, but what I would love to do is to go in and actually train the supervisors or managers because they can ask me their questions one-on-one. And it might just me doing on-site. It could be a lunch and learn via Zoom. I'd send them lunch and we'd do a free lunch and learn with them because I think it's so important for employers as managers to learn what to do and learn, you know. And I know they're always going to have pushback of you're trying to have me do more with less people, or I already have so much responsibilities. I don't have time for this. But I'm going to tell you, if you don't train your managers and your supervisors, the penalties and the fines are atrocious. Like in some cases, the minimum fine is $150,000 and can go up with each thing they find. And if they find one thing, then
There's
they're
more.
always going to find a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I would recommend. Now, employees, if they have questions, I do consultation calls and we talk about what I can do to sign up for a client coaching program. I've helped other fibro coaches with their clients and we just do a consultation fee then with that. But I'm always willing to help because my passion is to help other people who have chronic illness, whether that's work-life balance as an employee who has it, or if it's for the employer learning, how can I help this person? And if you say, I don't have anybody who has a chronic illness, I would tell you
You're
you're
kidding
wrong.
yourself.
You're wrong. It's
It just
that
means they're too afraid to tell you and let it out in the open.
They just don't want to tell you because they need that job and they need that insurance. So I think it's just so important that you find somehow to get training on it, to teach your managers, even teach your employees what can help them or where to go when they have questions. And we as managers, HR, supervisors, whoever you are in the workplace, you have to be open to that and believe them.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you mentioned in your book is having those policies written out in some place where people can see them. I know that was one of the things that was so hard for me is we didn't have anything like that. I had no idea walking into my boss's office what may or may not happen. But as employers, as managers, we can make that easier for our employees by having written policies, standard posted in the employee handbook, the whole 9 yards. So if someone is listening who is a manager, a boss, owns their own company, anything like that, what's the best way to connect with you to have you, or at least talk to you about having you do some work?
You can contact me at my email, which is J Hamilton, that's JHAMILTON at coachingpi.com. Or you can go to my website, which is coachingpi.com. And you can even schedule just a consultation through there with me.
Even if it's not somebody with fibro, if it's a manager. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And then, of course, that's how somebody would schedule with you if they were looking for one-on-one help, either with their fibromyalgia or fibro at work.
That way they get on my calendar and they can just make a note in there that, hey, I'm a company, this is my position, and I just want to visit with you more. So
Perfect. Now, I know your book is out on Amazon. If people want, if they're paperback or Kindle people, that's the best way to go. However, you and I were talking before we started recording. You are also giving free copies if people email you. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep. If you want to contact me and get a free copy, just send me an email at jhamilton@coachingpi.com and I'll send you over a free copy.
Awesome. We will have that in today's show notes. It's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/93. And if that changes, if you're listening to this down the road a few months, if Julie is offering that in a different way, the show notes will have that all updated for you. So to wrap this up then, Julie, I would love to give you a chance. Just speak your heart to the people who are listening here, employer or employee, and what is it you would love to share with them?
Oh man, I do have the gift of gab. So is there a time limit? No, I'm kidding. I just want to stress how important it is for both employers to understand, but I just feel for the individuals who have a chronic illness, because as you know, Tammy, you and I have it. We have a lot of friends that have it. And my heart really breaks, even for the clients I've worked with that go into their office or their place of business and just how they are treated because they have a chronic illness, because they can't be to work on time, because they can't do this job or that job or this task or whatever. And it breaks my heart because there are things that people can do and then they don't really understand the labor laws. In a lot of ways, I've ran across where office managers and even HR people are not administering things right. And believe me, I am not like perfect or all of that, but I have dealt with that stuff for so many years and it just breaks my heart for people. So I really want people to reach out. I want you to know there's hope. There's people you can work with, both on employer or employee side, and just have a better quality of life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. To give people some examples, what are some things you've done with clients to help change that?
I actually had one client, when I first met her, she could not lift her head off of a pillow due to migraines and fibromyalgia, but we got her back to work with job accommodations. She was working 30 hours a week. She has a lot of sensory issues. So just went through my gamut of tools and tricks I have in my toolbox on things that she could do for noise, smell, sight, and touch, just a lot of those sensory issues, things that she could wear at work, things she could do to drive at night against lights, even for long distances, tools you can use in your car so it's not so painful and exhausting. That's one thing. Another client I had traveled for her job occasionally to conferences. She had a service animal, which I thought this was the most amazing thing. I wish I could understand how they do this. But the service animal would let her know when she needed to eat because of her blood sugar, and then also when a migraine was coming on. So the service dog would notify her. So she needed to travel with that dog because she never knew. So, just learning job accommodations in the workplace, traveling work accommodations, conference work accommodations, and then also with, her service animal and then her migraines and her fibromyalgia. I mean, there were so many gamuts we had to work with. And she had to move home before I started working with her. And when we ended, she moved back into her own apartment and was independent again. And, those are the kinds of stories that just to this day give me chills. It's just like, gosh, isn't that just wonderful?
That's why we do what we do. That is awesome. That is awesome. So if you're listening and like the client she just talked about, moved home because you couldn't be on your own, there are things that can be done. If you're somebody who had to quit your job because of your fibromyalgia, there are things that can be done. And I know we're talking a lot here about things that can be done at work to make work easier for you. But trust me, Julie also knows, because I trained her, I know. There are ways that you can actually improve your fibromyalgia as well. I mean, that's the best work accommodation of all, is just getting better. But especially when you're in that kind of environment, sometimes we have to make things easier for us so that we have that space to let our bodies heal. It may mean taking some FMLA to give us some space and time to heal, or some work accommodations so we can eventually maybe get back where we don't need them. So,
Yeah. One thing I did not mention in kind of my journey or my story is there is a point with my fibromyalgia, I was in bed 90% of my time. I worked from my bed. I did everything from there because I didn't even have enough energy to sit up to eat. Today, I'm hiking, biking. I've been training for a 10K. Now, I like to say training because people think I'm running, but I'm only walking at this point. But still, a 10K walk is a long ways. I'm doing all that. Plus, I travel a lot because my husband travels for his job and I can work from anywhere. So you can do it if you put your mindset and you want to do the hard work, because it's not easy.
right, right. It's not. And sometimes we need somebody who knows things we don't know, right? Like we're limited to, like, maybe you've done everything you know how to do. Maybe you've done everything your doctor knows how to do. Maybe you need somebody else added to that equation that can give you some insight beyond that. So
Yeah, we don't know what we don't know.
that's right. That's
And
right.
the thing about Tami International Fibro Coaching Institute is the coaches that she works with is like a network. So we meet as a group, we help each other out if we need recommendations, or if we don't know how to work with a client. We have a whole group of individual coaches that we can go to. Have you worked with this kind of a client? Or Julie, I have this client. Can we do a coaching session together? So we are a great network of coaches that Tami has put together.
That's right. It helps so much for, I don't know, it's the whole synergy of it all, right? Like we're more than the sum of our parts, right? It's been so fun I've learned so much from you guys. I mean, seriously, everything I know about work stuff, I learned from Julie Hamilton. Right?
Yeah.
And we all learn from each other, and we can all, like, hey, do you know a doctor over there? We can help you find people sometimes. It's great. It's great.
And it's a great group of coaches and a wealth of knowledge. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Julie. Thank you for finally writing your book. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
The
Thank
world
you.
needed this.
Thank
And
you
yeah,
for those little nudges, Tami.
kicks in the butt.
Okay.
Seriously, everybody, you need a copy of her book. Make sure you email Julie to get a free copy if you like. Of course, if reading on paperback is your thing, you'll find that on Amazon. We'll have links to that in today's show notes. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/93. And that wraps up my interview with Julie Hamilton about her book, Chronic Illness at Work. If you are listening to this and thinking, wow, if only I had that kind of help, work would be so much easier, or my fibromyalgia would finally have a chance to get better if I was not so stressed and crashing so hard after every day at work. If that's you, I encourage you to reach out to Julie, schedule a consultation. You have absolutely nothing to lose. You can reach her through her website or on our Find a Coach page. We will have both of those links in today's show notes. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/93. If you are an employer, if you are a boss or an HR person, own your own company, consider scheduling a consultation with Julie to talk about how she can help you support your employees a little bit better. There are going to be so many more people in the workforce who are dealing with a chronic illness after this COVID pandemic. As we talked about in our interview, so many people are being diagnosed with long COVID. We're going to see a lot more of that. And it can be really important to have those policies in place for your employees to know exactly how to handle things, which of course makes your company much more inclusive and much more welcoming to people with a chronic illness, and just honestly makes your life easier because those policies are already outlined for you. If you would like to reach out to Julie, again, we will have those links in today's show notes. Go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/93. And please grab a copy of her book. It is such a great resource. If you know somebody who's working, if you know somebody who is a manager or a boss or owns their own company, get a copy for them. You'll find it on Amazon or you can email Julie. Again, just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/93 for all of those contact links. Last, I've got this week's listener shout out for you. This came through Instagram from a listener in New Mexico who said, "I just found you this past weekend and love what I've heard so far. The focus on self-compassion is revolutionary for me after the fix it, fix it, fix it message of so much that I followed in recent years. Thank you." And thank you for pointing that out. That's such a great reminder. Yes, of course, all of us, we want to feel our best, right? And there are things that we need to fix. So, of course, we're going to talk about fixing it. But sometimes the way to fix it is actually through rest, through embracing and accepting what is going on with our bodies. I like to say so often that what got me to remission was a whole lot of hard work, and a lot of times that hard work looked like rest. You cannot get to where you want to be if you're hating your body doing it. This is a whole nother podcast episode, so I'm just going to leave it there. But thank you. Thank you so much for recognizing this and for sharing it. I will see all of you back here next time as I interview my friend, Pat Shevland, and we will actually be talking about grief. When you are diagnosed with a chronic illness, there is sometimes a lot to grieve. Loss of our health, loss of friends, family, careers, hobbies. It can be a lot of loss. We are going to be talking about that in our next episode, as well as just the impact that grief has on our own illness. Sometimes people are diagnosed with fibromyalgia after big losses in life. So join us back here next time as we talk more about grief. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.